Welcome, everybody. Before we start, I want to acknowledge that we are presenting, or Alison, Amber, and Liza are presenting from the shared territories of the Coast Salish people, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We thank them for stewarding the land in the past and look forward to working together and supporting their rights going forward. This is a session on best practices for new advocates. It's really meant as a session to give you the opportunity to hear from people who've been working in the field for a long time. We want to provide you guys are waving in the background, I see you. Okay, it's meant in the best possible way. It's meant to support you, to give you links to experienced advocates, to give you an opportunity to ask questions, understanding that many of you are working in small offices or offices on your own, and that you're not working with people who do the same kind of work as you. So this is meant to support you. That's what it's meant for. And I think we've picked very good resource people to do that. I will let Amber and Lisa introduce themselves both, but just briefly I want to let you know that each of them have worked in advocacy for a long time. Amber has a master's in law, in animal welfare law, and teaches at the university in that and other subjects. She's worked at Atira for many years, and I'm sorry, I don't know the exact number, and is only in the near future moving on from Atira, but has worked there for many years. And Liza McDowell has worked at many of the agencies, nonprofit agencies and advocacy agencies in the downtown Eastside. She's been at Atira, and she currently works at the downtown Eastside Women's Center, often working on child protection law, but on other issues as well. And they're great advocates, have often helped with training, are just very supportive of other advocates as well. So we're going to, the plan for today, and it can change as we go along, but the plan for today is to have Amber and Liza talk to each other and about issues that they've seen and coping mechanisms that they've developed as an advocate over the long term. And to do that as a bit of a presentation and record that so that then it can be used by other advocates can observe it if they haven't been able to attend this session, and then to open it up to discussion, which then will not be included in any recorded presentation that will be put up on the web. I think that's all we need to know. So I'm going to hand it over to Amber and Lisa now. Thanks.
Thank you, Lois.
So, do you want me to start?
Yes, please.
Okay. And please, hi everybody. Thanks for that intro, Lois. It's so nice to see some of you who we know and some new faces, I'm sure, doing really important advocacy work across the province. So welcome. I'm super excited to be presenting today with Liza McDowell from the Downtown Eastside Women's Center. Liza has been doing this work for how many years, Liza?
Yeah, I think pretty close to 20, for sure I'll say 24 years.
Yeah, so Lisa's been doing this work for 24 years and primarily in the Downtown Eastside. Yeah. And I've been doing this work for 14 and a half years at Atira Women's Resource Society. And Liza and I work right across the street from each other, and we never see each other because we're busy, like I'm sure all of you, running off of our feet, trying to put out figurative and sometimes real fires. And yeah, so it's just such a treat to be able to just like actually sit here with Liza, and it's a treat for all of us to pick Liza's brain because she just has so much knowledge and does so much good work for women in the community. So it's just fantastic to be with Liza. In terms of my own work at Atira, I mostly do what I would call income security issues for women. So that would be often, like, most likely government benefits. And then housing, so tenancy, sometimes a little bit of co-op, a little bit of strata comes up, a little bit of animal law, just because, like Lois said, I randomly, studied that in a master's in law. And then also I'm a member of the Sucker Creek Cree Nation, which is a nation in Northern Alberta. And I also have a special interest in Indigenous rights and Indigenous legal issues. And then increasingly, I've done a lot of human rights work. So that's been a big focus for me too. And police accountability, which is a big issue in our community here and I'm sure elsewhere. So maybe I'll let Liza tell you a little bit more about herself and her work. I'll just shove this over.
Hi, everybody. It's so nice to be here with Amber. I feel so honored to be invited. Thank you so much to the Law Foundation and to Legal Services for inviting me. I have been so blessed in my career to have such a great job to do, and the support that I'm able to have to the community that I work in and serve. And I feel very blessed. And also I want to say that I feel very honored to be with Amber, because Amber is such a great legal mind, and she is a super support person. And when you need anything, you can call her and she'll make herself available. She'll return your calls. And it's just great to have that support. And that's the one thing that I have learned as we go along, you'll see, is that it takes a village for all of us to work together, regardless of where we are. It takes a village of advocates with loads of empathy to just do this great work that we do. So thank you so much again. And I don't know who should start, Amber.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Lois kind of said what we're doing, but basically we each have our top 10 sort of grounding points or tips for advocacy generally. So hopefully it's something that's applicable to all of you in your work. I know you're all in different communities and serving different communities, but hopefully it's helpful to you and hopefully it resonates with you. And once we're able to open it up for question or comments, we're excited to have that discussion with you as well, because you come in, I know many of you are new advocates, but I know you come in with your own lived experience and your own skills and your own things that are going on for you in your community. So happy to just have the space and time to have this conversation. So maybe without further ado, Liza and I can get into our, like what we've kind of each set out. We each have our own top 10 lists, which there's some overlap, and we'll just chat about that.
I'm going to come in like this voice from beyond. Before people ask, can we post those up on Sched after the session?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. The first one, and you'll see where they overlap, which I kind of really enjoyed. Amber sent me hers and then I sent mine to her. And so it was interesting. We did it in the same day. So there wasn't a lot of time, we did this all on our own. So the first one that Amber listed, and of course the title is Top 10 Things I've Learned as an Advocate. Number 1, work-life balance is not just important, but necessary. Insist on what you need to have it and make no apologies for it. Go ahead, Amber.
Yeah, I'm curious to know whether Liza agrees with me and if you all agree with me, but for me personally, being in this work, and Liza's been in this work longer, so I mean, she really knows the magic of how you have longevity in this work. But for me, I have found it important that this work is a 36-hour work week for me. And there are times when I really have to stretch myself a bit, because there's things that come up in this work that are urgent, time sensitive. You might have to spend a bit of extra time. I'm personally okay with doing that as long as I am saving that time for later, where maybe I can spend a bit more time for myself. And for me, that's important. I have seen, and I'm sure Liza's seen too, where there are people that do this work and it's not sustainable for them. And sometimes I think it's not sustainable because they've taken the weight of the world on their shoulders, and it's easy to do that in this work because we're doing work that is important and it matters to people, and there's an endless amount of it. And I think for me, I've just had to get really comfortable with the fact that I'm never going to respond to all of my emails, and the work is never going to be done. When the work is done, we will be out of jobs, and hopefully that's because the social justice has been solved. But until then, you know, we do the best of the ability that we can within the time that we can, which is humane for us. And for me, what is humane is that I work a 36-hour work week, and when I leave work, I leave work. And then, of course, there are times when I do think about the women that I work with, so it's hard not to take it home, but I try not to. I try to do other things that are enjoyable for me, and I try to get a good night's sleep. I try to exercise, and I try to really take care of myself, because I've always felt that if I'm not taking care of myself, and if I let myself run ragged, then I'm not doing a good job. I'm doing a disservice to women, actually. Like, it's not a service to our clients to not take care of ourselves. And I've said in the past that I kind of liken it to, you know, when you're on a plane, not sure how many people are on a plane these days, but when you're on a plane and, you know, the flight attendant tells you, you know, in the event of an emergency, put your own mask on first. And that's sort of how I think about it. If you need to come into your job ready to do your job, and I don't think you can do that if, you know, if you're super stressed out, sleep deprived, and I tend to get quite crabby, quite frankly. Yeah, exactly. There was a comment there, you can't fill a glass from an empty pitcher. That's a good analogy too. Yeah, and I do notice if I stretch myself too thin, I sort of, my compassion starts to wear thin, and that's like not good when that happens. So yeah, that's what I mean about that. And I don't think you need to apologize for being humane to yourself. Yeah, so that's one for me. I don't know, Liza, if you have comments on that before we talk about your top one.
On everything that you said, and I love it, and it was said very, very well indeed, as usual.
Thanks, Liza. All right, and so Liza's, I'm just gonna turn down our phone here because I don't think we can really mute ourselves. See, the phone never stops ringing, and yet here we are, we're taking the time to have this conversation. So Liza's top first tip, I accept that my client has the problem and I have the challenge. So tell us what you mean by this, Liza. Share your wisdom.
Well, in the very beginning years of my advocacy, I was very sensitive to the issues that would come to me, and I took them on very personally. And I realized as time went on that perhaps that wasn't the best approach for me. So when I say that, I actually say it. Okay, I even say it out loud. You have this problem and I'm going to help you with it. It's your problem and my challenge to help you get through this. So let's do what we can together. And by working together, we make good progress, and it's what that person is asking for. The individual who's come to see me, that's exactly what they want. And that I feel that it's a way of my own, if I can use this expression that I'm not that fond of, self-care. By saying, okay, Lisa, this is not your problem, it is your challenge. And then I get on with the work. And that's how I see it working for me.
So that totally makes sense to me. And I feel like there is a little bit of overlap between that and saying, you know, there is a bit of a boundary between work and like, so your work involves assisting people with what's happening for them, and then not necessarily taking that on, like taking that home with you, or taking that on. It sounded to me like you were saying maybe taking it on as though it were your own problem and you were carrying that around.
Yes, and I want to say this too, and this probably will happen to some of you. It certainly happened to me, and I'm sure it's happened to Amber. So you've done everything that you need to do according to all of the rules for residential tenancy arbitration. And at one time, we could actually do these in person. So you would take the SkyTrain, and then you take a short bus ride, and you'd get to the street that you needed to be on, and you'd go into the residential tenancy office in Burnaby, and you'd be all set to go, and you'd be waiting, and you'd have delivered all of your packages correctly, and you knew you had all of your ducks in a row, and your client did not show. And it's really like, oh my goodness, what am I going to do now? This is, you know, I've done all of this, I've done this, I've done this. But then it's not my problem. I did everything. I did what I could. My client didn't show. I can't beat myself up over that. I can't. I have to just say, thank you very much for making it a possibility, but it didn't happen. We'll wait the 15 or 20 minutes that were allotted. Then you just leave, and then you get back on the bus, then you get back on the SkyTrain, and that's what you do. It's not good to have, you know, the raging heartbeat and all of that what ifs, what should have, and what ifs, because that's not good for you. It's just let it go. It was my challenge. That's it. Does that sound too harsh, Amber?
No, I think it's such a good example because it happens, and it's happened to me too. And sometimes it's easy to get really invested in a case. And of course you should be invested. Like you should be putting, you know, your heart and soul into it and all of your skills into it. But at the end of the day, it isn't your life. Like it isn't your life. It isn't your legal problem. And I think if you get over invested, you also risk like really trying to, I mean, for one, there's an emotional toll on you for that, and a stress that you don't need to take on. And two, I think you can also start to get where you're trying to take over the case and trying to take over your client's like choices. Like it ultimately is their case and it's up to them. And of course we want to let them know, you know, the information that they need to make those choices and empower them to make choices. But at the end of the day, it's your client's choice of whether they and even if it's whether they decide to show up at a hearing or not. And of course, it's disappointing when that happens because you have invested the time and the work. But yeah, I think it's a good example, and it is helpful to know that, you know, not to just take that on and
The second item on Amber's list is empathy and active listening. Go a long way to understanding what your client needs from you.
Yeah, and I think maybe advocates are a little bit better at this skill than maybe lawyers. Having went to law school and been legally trained, this is not necessarily something you're taught in law school. Like, you know, I went to law school for 3 years, and I don't really recall us spending a lot of time on the concepts of empathy and active listening. We were, you know, really looking at court cases and stuff, which in my view kind of, it makes things seem much more abstract and dehumanized than they really are, because really most of law, especially the type of law that we are doing, is very human. It's about a human being on the other side of your desk, or I guess by phone now in these times. But in any event, you know, people are usually coming to you in crisis. And I think one of the things that I learned in this, I mean, I came into this job as a law graduate and thinking, oh yes, I've got these law skills that I can apply. And really what people need is they need you to just show them some compassion and listen to what they're telling you, because a lot of times the women that come in to see me, no one's actually taken the time to listen to them. Most lawyer appointments are 30 minutes. My appointments are always by default an hour, because in my view, 30 minutes is not enough time for someone to come into your office, especially if they've never met you, and tell you something very difficult and personal, and to give you the information that you need to do something useful for them. And also, people don't necessarily tell you things in a way that you might think is the way to think about a legal problem, or, you know, people don't think about things in terms of like, well, this is what the ministry wants in a form, and people don't live their lives like it's a government form. So sometimes I've talked to someone, and I mean, for one, if they're in trauma or crisis, that's going to affect how they're going to tell you this information. And two, you know, they might not be thinking about it in a chronological order, or it might just take time for them to tell you because it's complicated. So there's been lots of times where I've been sitting and listening and a woman will say something just in passing, and not even really know that it's significant. And it's through spending that time that you're able to gather the information you need to do your job, and also build some trust and rapport with your client who may have a lot of good reasons to be suspicious of legal service providers. And I will say that as a new advocate, I think I actually maybe did the best job at active listening, because I really had no idea how I was going to help people solve their legal problems. So I learned from just sitting and going, wow, I really better pay attention to what this woman's telling me, because I don't have any legal answers for her, so I'm just going to listen and try to take notes and figure out what I'm doing. And learning that that's actually a super useful skill, because you do learn stuff, and people just so appreciate that you've shown them the compassion and time. Like, it's a really underestimated skill. And some of you might, I don't know if you've checked out Myrna McCallum's Trauma Informed Lawyer podcast yet, or any of her trainings, but she talks about this a lot too. And yeah, I highly recommend all of her works on this particular piece too. I don't know if you have anything to add to that piece, Liza.
I really think that you covered that extremely well, and especially the listening, the active listening and empathy, because that is really the key. Taking the best notes that you can and listening and letting them take their time to explain it to you. And I'm right with Amber. If I first meet someone, I mean, it's a good hour to an hour and a half that I've met with them. I've done an intake with them. I've gotten all of the information that I need to proceed. I have a consent release for whatever organization or benefit or ministry. And then I say, thank you so much, book a time, and then sit down and really do a good analysis, yeah, with the information we collect.
Okay, great. And thanks, Kate, for noting Myrna's podcast there on the chat. So I'm going to go to number 2 on Liza's top 10 list, which says, I can relax when I accept that maybe the issue is bigger than my caseload can hold right now. And then in brackets, accepting that the issue may need a lawyer. So do you want to talk about that a little bit more, Lisa?
Okay. So can I look at that one more time? Yeah. Number 2. So I can relax. Well, that's because I put that in because I have a tendency to not be relaxed. And I can get very, very hyped up about a problem and an issue. And sometimes I can just say to I think, oh my God, I can't do this. It's too much. I won't be able to get through it. And I don't want to do a disservice. So then I have to accept, can I do this? So I analyze, am I able to do this? Does my organization have the capacity to allow me to be able to do this? And sometimes the answer is no. And that's really doesn't feel very good, but it's the right thing to do, to refer out. And if you think that this issue may need a lawyer, then you really need to refer. You just do it. You create a network for yourself of trusting people in your community, or even of the whole POVNet and advocacy community, where you know who you can talk to, and you call them up. And if you have a supervising lawyer, your supervising lawyer will direct you in that way as well. And you're very lucky if you do. I think calling someone up and running it by them often is really the best thing to do. And if you use a lawyer to do that, that's really wise if you can. And I think it's the kindest, one of the kindest ways that you can service and deliver the quality of the delivery of service you give, saying to someone, I see exactly what you need. I'm not the one that's going to be able to help you with this, but I'm going to find you somebody that can.
Yeah, thanks for that, Liza. And I hope that the rest of you feel like some relief that even Liza is saying that there's things she can't handle, and that that's okay. It's okay to be overwhelmed, and it's okay to know that there's limits. And sometimes I think the most important thing is knowing what you can't do, so that someone is appropriately served and you're not overwhelmed and feeling like you're taking on something that really you shouldn't be taking on, or that would be, yeah, just really difficult to take on. And also, or maybe you can take it on with some support, exactly. like Liza said. And of course, there's PovNet, there's the Law Foundation, there's we have our networks of communities, which is fantastic.
I'm going to read number 3 on Ms. Prince's list. Know your client's goal. Knowing your client's goal is also key to understanding what your client needs from you.
Yeah, so when I first started in my role at Atira, I had some very brief overlap with the advocate who was here before me, who also happened to be a lawyer, and I think she went on to be Crown Counsel. But anyway, one of the things she told me that really stuck with me was, you know, what's really important when you meet with people is you have to know what it is they actually want. Because again, people come in, they might be in you know, crisis and trauma, and they might just want to tell you what happened to, like, it's important to just tell you what happened to them and be believed. They might be looking for you to solve a legal problem, and knowing what it is that someone actually wants you to do for them is really key to be able to move forward in that relationship. I've had experiences where, you know, like, I've spent the time active listening, and someone's telling me about a situation, and I might in my own mind be trying to work out, okay, well, they could maybe do this, they could maybe do that. And it turns out that someone really just wants to spend the time to be heard. I personally think that that's a useful way to spend time. Especially for marginalized communities who aren't believed or aren't given the time of day to say what's important to them. So for me, it's really important to not just hear what people have to say, but then to know what is it they want to do out of this situation. And then that can guide you in figuring out, is this something I can take on, like Liza mentioned, or is this something that I need to send to someone else? Is this a realistic goal? Sometimes we meet with women who, you know, they're having a problem, and we had this come up recently, someone having a problem in their tenancy, and they want all of the landlord staff to be fired. That's, you know, really unrealistic. And so, yeah, we want to provide the time and space to really hear what the issues are so that we can truly understand. But then also at the end of the day, and probably early in, you know, probably on an initial intake, figure out, and what is it that you've told me a lot, what is it that you want to see happen from this situation, so that, you know, you can figure out next steps.
And I've also had the experience where I've actually had someone come to see me, and I can see how we can, you know, reach a solution, and that's not the solution that they want. Mm-hmm. They actually don't care about that, and you're like, oh, I thought that's why you came, and no, I don't. I'm walking away from it. I don't. That's not what I want. And you're like, okay, then. But then you say, are you sure? Because I know that I can do this piece for you. Nope, I don't want that. I want this. So you just do. That's why you're there. You're there to take direction from them. Number 4, or is it my turn? Your turn. You're doing me. Oh, you're not my number 3.
Yeah. Okay. So Liza's number 3. I have learned that sometimes my client's first loss is their least loss, and to help them accept this, not with defeat, but with self-care, especially in RTA issues.
So that lesson did come for me from a residential tenancy issue. And I really, there's some things like Amber said, you can't do. You can't have the landlord fire all of his staff, or an organization that's running housing rather, necessarily change the way that they deliver service to their tenants or their members or their residents. That does happen. But I think what I'm talking about is if it's already a precarious issue in the first place and you're concerned that the landlord might want to take something out on the client so that certain decisions can be made by the arbitrator in that they turn things around a little bit. You owe this amount of money and you don't know about owing that money. You're being taken for, evicted for another reason. You decide to fight with the landlord. You end up paying for the landlord's filing fee. You end up paying for your rent. You end up paying for all of your arrears, and your first loss is greater than, your second loss is greater than your first loss. So sometimes what you need to do is to try to explain to the person who's come to you for help in that situation that this could be something that happens. This could be the result of your fighting for your rights, that you end up to be punished a second time. It doesn't happen that frequently, but it does happen, and it's really hard when it happens to one of your most disenfranchised clients. The person who's been badly treated in the first place, that really shouldn't even be in that decision, is being then forced to come up with more finances to get themselves out of a situation. That's critical, that's really hard, and it can happen. So you need to be able to explain it as kindly as and softly and compassionately as you can, that maybe you should just take this 2 months notice, not fight it. It's 2 months, it's kind of not that bad. Let's look at the options for you. And that's what I meant by that. Okay.
I think that's really important, Liza, and this is something I see in my work a lot of times too, where sometimes the women I work with have a hard time accepting that that's the outcome of their case because it doesn't feel like justice to them. And sometimes I agree and and say, yeah, this is crap. This is a crap outcome for you. But it doesn't necessarily mean that the alternative is going to be better. And you see this, I think the RTA or RTB hearings is a good example because the likelihood of appealing an RTB decision, for example, at court, it's hard to pursue. It's on a higher standard. The judge can't just substitute their own opinion for what they think should have happened in that case. Right. Like there's, it has to be on this standard of patent unreasonableness, and that can be hard to prove at court. And if you proceed with a case like that and you're unlikely to win, then you can have costs ordered against you. So like you said, it's sometimes you need to cut your losses while you're not ahead. And I agree with you. Sometimes often I think it's important to be able to explain that. And it's a real skill, and I'm sure it's a real skill that you've developed of how you do that, like how you explain to someone, that you really sort of think this is probably the end of the line for that issue, and to get to a place of acceptance. And I think definitely talking about what the risks are of pursuing it is one, but also just approaching it with some compassion. And do you have other thoughts on how you, like when you talk about relaying that, and have you seen where, like, what's more likely to lead to success when you share with women, like, I think this is the end of the road?
Offering them an option to an adversarial role. So why don't we see if we can reduce the negative outcomes of this particular issue by mediation first. Let's see if we can talk to the landlord as opposed to necessarily getting right to an arbitration. Maybe if we can do that, and I think arbitrators in general like that you do that in the first place. If you go to an arbitration and the arbitrator might ask you, Did you try to solve this in any other way? You know, did you try to pay your rent? Did you offer payment plan? Did you agree to have somebody else take your cat? Whatever the issues may be. If you have tried that, that's a very important piece, a mediation piece, and also it shows that you're flexible. It shows that you're tractable, that you're willing to make this an easier road for everybody involved, for the individual involved. Is that answering your question? I'm kind of lost here, but I do think that you want to fight for the rights. You want them to feel empowered because they are doing something about this issue where they are being very badly treated. But at the same time, offering them mediation can be very empowering because that's an opportunity that they have, that they can speak and say what it is that is their problem and why they're having these problems. It empowers the woman in my particular case. Yeah. Is that good? Okay?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it also comes back, what you just said there reminded me, I mean, one, there's always like power of settlement because I've gotten stuff in settlement that I was like, if this went to a hearing, this would have been bad news. So it's always great when you can solve someone's problem in a way that you have a guaranteed result for them than rolling the dice. Yeah. And then I think also I have been quite shocked by like sometimes we'll lose, we'll lose a hearing or something, but also because you've provided that opportunity for someone to be heard, like one with you, and then two through the process and advocated with them for their rights. Sometimes that is enough for people to accept the outcome, because if they feel like they were heard and you supported them to be heard and have a fair process, that then there's more likely to be an acceptance out of that. Yeah.
That's definitely how I feel about that. Number 4 for Amber Prince, be clear about what you can do. If your client's goal is not realistic or possible or you can't help them with it, be really clear about that. They can always get a second opinion. And this is an area that you and I both totally agree with. Go ahead, Amber.
Yeah, so this comes up for us quite a bit at Atira. We do the best that we can with the resources that we have, but we're not always able to provide the ideal level of service that we would like to have for women and that women obviously would like to have. So we find that we have to be just so clear at the outset of what we can and can't do, just so there's no misunderstandings, false expectations, disappointment. So thinking about the example of the woman who said, I want all of this staff to be fired. I mean, one, that's just not a realistic goal, and that's not something we can assist with. And in that case, like Liza said, she followed up by saying, often in those situations there are remedies, and that women might not like those remedies or want to pursue them. But it's really important to just be really clear and be able to offer those remedies and say, well, this is what I can do, but I can't do that. So, and sometimes it's hard to be honest because you feel like you're disappointing your clients or you wish there was more that you could do, but it's just so much better to be just very upfront and honest at the outset, because nothing good is going to come of like hiding that information or waiting on that information to spare someone's feelings.
Yes.
Yeah. Does that make so?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I 100% agree with you on that.
All right, so we're moving on then to number 4 for Liza, which is, I have learned that asking for direction from my colleagues is a respectful way to assist my client.
Well, because, I mean, you can't know everything, and you need to pull in support if the way, the avenue, the road that you're going to take in order to assist the person is going to be a little bit different. So I find that if I make some phone calls, if I say to someone like, hi, Dee Dee, I've run up against this today. This came up and this is what my approach is. And I was wondering if you thought that this would be this or, you know, and then having someone like her, like Dee Dee, say, you know what, I think that that's a really good idea. And also you could include this. So then you're like, wow, I never thought of that. Thank you so much for that is so important. And if you didn't ask that question, if you didn't reach out and ask that question, that you're afraid that someone's going to think you're stupid because you asked it. If you didn't ask it, you wouldn't have known the option. And there you are, you have the answer right in your lap. And it is the most effective way. It truly is. If you're stumped, just reach out. Don't be embarrassed about a stupid question. As young advocates, new advocates, we're always afraid that we're going to look stupid. That's okay. Everybody has to do that. And I think it doesn't matter how long you've done the work that you're doing, that you can lose some information way back in the gray matter that you have to dig up again, you know, because it might be an issue that you haven't seen for a long time. You might haven't been asked that question for a long time. So that reaching out to me is a really good service to my clients. Let them know that I'm going to do that as well. To say to them, you know what, I don't know the answer to that, but I'm going to try to find out for you. And I'm going to do my best to be able to explain it to you to see what we can do moving forward.
Yeah, thanks for that, Liza. And I shout out to Kate as well for including PovNet information on there, because that's exactly that type of support that I'm sure both Liza and I have benefited from over the years. Because you can't have all of the answers, like you really can't, and that's us included. Like we're kind of now considered senior advocates, right? And there's lots of stuff I don't know, and it's almost like the longer I've been doing this work, the more comfortable I am with asking stupid questions. and getting comfortable with that, because once you become a senior advocate, you realize, like, oh yeah, it's not like I don't know the answers to this just by virtue of being senior. So you realize everyone has the same problem of not knowing everything. And yeah, you can get little nuggets of gold from whether you make a PovNet post, which for some of you in more rural communities, that might be your real lifeline to other advocates in the province, or if you have like a trusted, or the call a friend option. There's so many times where, exactly like Liza's saying, where I've reached out to someone and been like, oh yeah, I never thought about that. It just opens up the options.
Well, number 5 on Amber's list is work through misunderstandings. And this is a tough one. If you run into misunderstandings with clients, see if you can come to a mutual agreement in writing for going forward. Explain that, please, but when you say you can come to a mutual agreement in writing for going forward.
Yeah, so this still happens to me. Again, this happens to you, I think, no matter where you are in your career as an advocate. I recently had one of my cases go off the rails where my client just lost confidence in me because I was really suggesting that she settle her case, and she really wants to try her luck in going to a hearing. And so she lost confidence in me in thinking that I don't think she can go to a hearing. So we had to work through that. Because that's a pretty significant, like, if you have a loss of trust with your client, that's getting into the territory of you might have to withdraw. I try not to withdraw if I can, because, as I'm sure all of you also experience, you might be it for someone. And at the same time, we're working with folks who, they've just experienced so much hardship. And they might be dealing also with mental health diagnoses. Like, there just might be so much going on. They're homeless, like, so trauma. Yeah, just so many Yeah, so many challenges that might make it difficult, like there might be communication breakdown. And so I have tried to, I think it's important to have those conversations with people when things are starting to go a little sideways, and see if you can work out those misunderstandings. So for my case that went off the rails, you know, we just had, I made it a priority to have a conversation. And I say put things in writing, but also like as a first step, have an actual conversation with your client. So her and I just sat down and chatted and worked through that misunderstanding. You know, and she let me know that she felt kind of pressured to settle. And so I had to take a step back and go, you know, I'm sorry if like you felt like I had made you feel pressured to settle. You have every right to go to a hearing. You have my advice about, you know, your likelihood of success. In her case, I didn't think she has no chance of success. I think it's going to be tough going for her, but you know, she has my advice on that and she has the right to pursue it. So we were able to work through that. This particular client is also Indigenous, and she has a lot of reasons to mistrust service providers. She's been let down by a lot of people. And so my job in that situation, I think, was to really, again, just approach her with compassion, a lot of listening about what her needs were, what her goal was, and see if we could come to a mutual understanding, which we were able to. And then that's when I was confirming to her in writing. And when I'm saying writing, I mean, our jobs are very on the front line practical. Sometimes, you know, the ideal of like you're typing up a letter and, you know, that doesn't happen for me all the time. I don't know for you, Liza. So we're texting because that's her mode of communication that she has. She's not gonna get a formal letter from me, like, but there's something, like there's some kind of record, whether it's text, email, that says, okay, so this is what I'm gonna do, right? You're good with that? Okay, let's move forward on that basis. Does that make sense?
Yes, indeed, indeed.
Oh, okay, well, you don't want to say it.
No, go move on.
Okay.
That was excellent.
Okay, so fifth on Liza's list, I have learned that I have to serve with compassion and sincerity. People can tell when I'm not being sincere.
So I have to say that in my years of working in the downtown east side, that this is a community full of a lot of sensitive people for very many different reasons. And there seems to be an amazing intuition, amazing skill to be able to read who is being sincere with me and can I trust this person. And the only way that you can develop trust is by sincerity. So tell the truth as much as you can and give them as much time as you can. Tell the truth, listen with compassion. And if you have to steer them in a different direction to find a solution, then do it with the most gentle way that you possibly can. And it is hard, but it is the best way to serve, especially when people are suffering with post-traumatic stress disorder, the trauma of isolation of foster care, the constant in and out of foster care that takes place with a lot of our women in this community, and the fact that promises have been made to them regarding their own children, and those things have not happened. And often you will hear that, no one's done anything for me. Everybody says they're going to do something for me. Everybody's going to tell me that they can help me, and nobody has. When you've brought that, then boy, you have a big job on your hands, because you have to take all the time that you can to develop that trust, and then you have to do your very best to help them. And that's when the referral comes in, but that's also when the serious nature of your job comes in. That's when you make those decisions about, is this a challenge that I can do? And be as honest as you can. And I find that that makes for good relationship with the people I serve, And I tell them right from the hop, I'm not gonna mislead you. I'm not gonna pretend that this is something that I can do that I can't, but let's look at the options that we have. Let's see how we can do it, and be as compassionate as you can. Because sometimes too, they're really still at the ceiling, right up on the ceiling, and it takes a while for you to bring them back down to the level that you're sitting at.
Thanks, Lisa. That just makes complete sense to me. Like, truth telling is part of having a relationship built on trust.
Yes. Yeah. Number 6 on Amber's list is acknowledge the injustice. And I love this one, Amber, by the way. Acknowledge the injustice, whether it's in your power or within the law to do something for your client. It can still go a long way to acknowledge the injustice they are experiencing. And that's fantastic. And please say more about that, Amber.
Yeah, I would say this is probably, if I had to shorten this list to top 5, this would make it to my top 5 list. Again, not necessarily something I learned in law school, but super important. And I'm glad this resonates with you too as well, Liza, because I can't emphasize enough how much it matters to people that if they come in and tell you that they've been sexually assaulted, you say, first of all, I believe you when you tell me that that happened. And second of all, I'm sorry that that happened to you. And like Liza said, with sincerity, just, I can't overstate how important it is. And I have had cases where, you know, the law doesn't provide a remedy or a good remedy for that situation that a client might be dealing with. And yet just having someone tell, maybe for the first time, say, I believe you, and say, I'm sorry that that happened to you, to see what a difference that can make for people. And it's super easy to do. I don't know if you had more that you wanted to say.
Well, in your workplace, in your workspace, if something like that were to happen to you, if in one morning someone came in to share with you that they had been sexually assaulted the night prior, they might talk about how the police talked to them, they might talk to you about how the hospital treated them. I think if you can, that you're going to offer that person some coffee or some water. You're going to ask someone else to come and sit for a moment. You're going to leave your office and you're going to look at your schedule, because you need to spend more time with that person because it's fresh. This is information that you need. You do need to know every step that was taken. Who did she speak to, and how was that all handled? You might need to reschedule other appointments. You need to make time. You go to your supervisor or your manager and just, you know, listen, this happened here. It's 10:30. I'd like to spend some time with her. I can't imagine that we will be done until around 12:30, 1 o'clock. And then you just readjust your schedule and give the best of yourself to that person in that situation. I think it's really important. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for adding to that, Liza. So number 6 on Liza's list. I have learned that I can never make promises, ever.
Well, because you want to say to somebody, and I'm really kind of guilty of that in the beginning of this career, because especially with, this is going to sound off, but you know, when you have an elder that comes to see you that's really having problems with their finances, and if you're talking about the federal government finances and really getting a swift solution to these issues, that's just not going to happen. It doesn't happen fast enough for me. So, and I remember saying to this sweet lady, you know, I promise you, I'm going to be able to, you know, I'm going to do this for you. She goes, but everybody said this to me, and everybody's told me this, and nobody's been able to help me get my whatever benefit. And so then, you know, and then you spend weeks and weeks and months, but it finally does happen. But it's, I think if we don't use the word promise, if we just say, I'm going to do my very, very, very best for you, I promise I'll apply myself. If you want to use the word promise to applying for yourself, that's okay. But don't tell the person that you promise that you'll be able to get that for them, because you can't make that promise. And that's important.
Yep, completely agree. And that's the same as how we try to approach it here at Atira in our legal advocacy program, is to just say, what I can commit to doing is doing my very best. Sometimes women will ask me, well, what are my chances? And I will say, you know, I think that you do have a good chance of getting X, Y, Z, but I can't guarantee it. Like, I'm not the person in control of this decision. I'm not the person making this decision. But what I can commit to doing is doing, you know, the best that I can for this outcome for you. Yeah.
Okay, number 7 on Amber's list, and this will make everybody in the community happy, because here we touch on all of our resources. Seek information and support when you need it. And Amber's got in brackets, and I still need lots of help. Example, PovNet, ClickLaw, Law Foundation manuals, LSAP manuals, LSS resources, CASEL, and your supervising lawyer. And you're really lucky if you have a supervising lawyer. Or you can be like me and you can call people that used to be your supervising lawyer and ask them for help. But and if you're not in our community, it is harder, I realize that. But I think that the CASEL line is amazing. Allison Ward has just been so tremendously helpful to myself, and I'm sure with Amber in our careers and working in family law, and in my particular case in working with child protection files, CFCSA files. I just want to touch on that too, with going back with acknowledging the injustice, because when you're dealing with child protection files, that will give you, that's a real feeling of injustice. That really makes you crazy trying to figure that out. But we're so lucky to have all of these resources around us, and we should use them all the time in our work. And nobody doesn't need support. All advocates need support.
Yeah, I think it's like you said earlier, this work happens in a community. Like it takes a village to do advocacy, and we have it. We're so lucky, and I know it's varying degrees for some of us in different communities. We have different resources, but yeah, we're lucky to have this, you know, this information available to us and network of people. Okay, so I'm moving on to number 7 on Liza's list. We should never take on a file that we are not prepared to complete, or take it the whole 9 yards.
Okay, so what I mean by that is that I'm not suggesting that, I think what I mean when I say that is sometimes I will have a woman come to see me and somebody has done something for her, made an application to do something, and then just sort of disappeared. Like, well, did you try contacting her again? Yes. Oh dear. So I understand that can happen to advocates, that, you know, we can fall down and break our arms, or we can you know, have family issues, or we can get sick, and so then we have to refer our files out to other people who can take care of them for us. But I just mean by the size of the file, what does the file entail? Can I do this? Do I have this kind of time to make this commitment? That's really important. And I don't want to be critical, because I think that that's not really what I want to do, but I want to say that sometimes, well, I've seen that sort of happen with family law lawyers, where all of a sudden I'm calling them and they're not working on that file anymore, and I'm like, well, how does that happen? Aren't you the lawyer not any longer? And I can't do it anymore. I have to pass the file on to somebody else. And sometimes your client can have 2 or 3 lawyers, and nobody's really finished anything. And then when you go back to look at what everyone's done, nothing has been done. No applications were made, and everybody's waiting for something to happen, and nothing's going to happen. So as an advocate, I find that really hard to take. I always think, well, gee, you know, why didn't you know that before you started. It's really important to say, okay, I'm going to take this and we're going to go from point A to point B and we're just going to do it. I think that's really important. I don't know if that's really the right example in this situation, but for me, I have had to finish reconsideration requests and disability applications that were not well done. And so you just kind of think, what was that person thinking? Yeah, that's what I meant by that.
Yeah, of course, I agree with that. It's do what you say you're going to do is like just like such an important principle in advocacy, and it is meant to be an important principle for lawyers as well. But yeah, how is someone going to trust you, or how are you going to do a good job if you say you're going to do something and then you don't do it? Like if you're a lawyer, you can be disciplined for that. So yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, I mean, there's been an issue with the hours, I think, for legal aid lawyers, for example, in family law, which is, we've seen, we on the front lines have seen the consequences of that. And yeah, I mean, this is why West Coast Leaf is bringing a legal claim on behalf of the Single Mothers Alliance for this reason. They're suing the government because there just hasn't been enough legal aid hours, which is, you know, exactly what you're talking about. If someone can have multiple lawyers, and the thing that someone needs to have happen hasn't happened, with like serious consequences to women and children and others. Yeah.
Number 8 on Ms. Prince's list, manage cynicism. This work can make you cynical about the world, but don't let it immobilize you.
So for a long time, I've had just a little sticky note at my desk that just says cynicism, just to remind me, because I think the longer you get into this work, and I'm curious to know what Liza has to say about this, the longer you get into this work, you can really start to become an old curmudgeon. And yeah, and you can, and sometimes that's unhelpful to your client. Like it's unhelpful if your client comes in and is saying, I want to do X, and you're like, oh, well, don't bother, because that's just going to be a waste of your time, and you're not going to win because the system sucks. And like, you just start to go on a rant about how the system is terrible. I mean, it is like a lot of times there's real problems to critique. There's real injustices to, you know, to speak from the rooftops about, but why is your client there? Like for you to assist them with something. And so you need to come back to, I think, again, this, you know, a lot of this stuff is interconnected. All of the principles or best practices that we're talking about, this sort of comes back to your client's goal of like, this isn't about you being disgruntled. It's about, you know, figuring out if there's something you can do to assist your client with. And I also sort of come back to the quote from Steve Jobs, which I guess is a bit dated now. I don't know if people really like, yeah, but those who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones that do. And I mean, sometimes as a new advocate, I was out to lunch. Like I will admit that there were times when I was just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go and do this thing. It's like, of course this is wrong, and I'm gonna go do this thing, and found out that that wasn't gonna happen. But sometimes I was crazy enough to think that I could, you know, do something quite big, and it worked. Yeah. And it actually worked. Yeah. I mean, we brought a human rights claim against the BPD recently and won. And, you know, thank you. A lot of people said that was unwinnable and there wasn't really any precedent. And we went for it. And there's also was it Gretzky who said, what is that saying of polls? Yeah, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Gary. So, yeah, and so I don't think either of us are ever gonna tell you, like, I know Liza for sure is never gonna tell you, don't take on a case with no merit. Because her and I have talked about where we've seen where, you know, maybe some keen law student is like, I'm gonna do a reconsideration based on this, and there's like zero law that's going to support you and 0 chance of success, that's not helpful.
No.
Because, you know, you're wasting your time, you're wasting the woman's time. You're maybe making a promise you can't keep, like Lisa was warning about. So yeah, don't do that. But I don't know. I also think that if there's a chance of success and it's important to your client, sometimes we need to push on the boundaries. Like sometimes we need to say like, no, this is wrong. And I don't care if it's hard, and my client doesn't care if it's hard. Yeah. Like our complaint against the VPD was hard too, but we had a client who said, I'm prepared to take on the VPD. I'm prepared to go face 5 officers and say what they did to me is wrong and challenge them on what they say happened. And in that case, like sometimes we need to be good allies and bring those type of challenges, because that's the only way that social justice moves forward too, is by actually not just always you know, perpetuating the status quo, but challenging. Right. So, and you need to believe that we can move out of the status quo in order to actually like advance those type of claims. And, you know, if you're too cynical, you can just sit there again and be a curmudgeon. So I don't know if you had more.
I don't think I have. I think you covered that extremely well, Amber. I'm comfortable letting you go carry on.
Yeah, and I guess we want to have time for anyone who has comments or questions too. Yeah. Okay, so number 8 on Liza's list. Always have your notepad ready, but be careful with your notes. Someone may ask to see them. And this is always an interesting dynamic with advocates, so feel free to share your wisdom on this.
Well, for sure. You really want to be able to, you have to keep notes, and you need to edit as you go along, and you should put no personal real remarks in your notes. You put the facts down, dates, things like this, but really and truly to try to keep any editorial to yourself in your notes. I think it's really important. And people have at the Women's Center, we believe in, you know, trying to create an anti-oppressive place where, so if someone says, well, can I see what you wrote? Then, you know, you do want to say, sure, take a look and see what I've written here. So just saying for your own self, but also for your own memory. And I'll give you an example of something that happened to me recently. I was attending many meetings with my single mom with all of her children, and social worker was quite dismissive in some of the requests that we made, but I kept very good notes. And when we finally were to meet, we finally got into a meeting that we were all at. So the team leader and the family preservation worker, the woman, her lawyer, and me, and the lawyer for the director. We, with my notes, I was able to establish quite a few promises that were made by the social worker to the mom that didn't take place. And one of them was the guesstimate of return of her children. And the social worker saying, I never said that. And I said, okay, just a minute, let me go through my notes. Yes, you did. So on September the 12th, when we met, these are the notes, and this is what you said, and I wrote them down. So note-taking is powerful, and it's very powerful. So I would suggest always keep a notepad, always keep a pen handy, and write down your notes. Very, very, very important. Keep good case notes, keep good case files. And when you're getting something ready to submit, make it so tight that if you only have a little bit of time to appeal, you're almost ready to go. That's another hint for new advocates. Okay.
Yeah, couldn't agree with that more. I've totally learned through trial and error here as well how important that is. You just never know when you might have to do an affidavit, or whether you might need to recall something, and it could be 2 years later, and you're not going to just remember if, you know, so having a habit of keeping good notes. Here we also, because we have multiple volunteers, it's always like, and make sure you put your name on it, and make sure you put the woman's name on it in case that piece of paper goes.
Exactly.
Do you know how hard it is for anyone who's still doing like paper copies of stuff? It's so hard if you didn't put the woman's or the client's name on the document, and then it's a loose piece of, I mean, you should have your documents bound, but you know, things happen where a paper can go astray, and if you don't have it dated and you don't have the name, you know, it just makes your life that much harder, and that much more difficult to provide appropriate service to your client. And then Liza also was talking about be careful about what you write in notes, and we have this policy at Atira as well, particularly for other staff like transition house staff who their records are much more likely to be subpoenaed than an advocate's notes. For us, we do have a precedent, which I believe Lois has a copy of, but it was a precedent of an advocate who claimed privilege, so litigation privilege over the documents she kept for a woman. Because our work is very legalistic, she was able to satisfy the court that in fact her information shouldn't be disclosed, because we're really doing work like a lawyer, and you can't have a relationship of trust and do your job properly with your client if your client knows that your notes are going to have to be handed over to the ministry or to whoever else. But having said that, you know, it's helpful to really include facts and what was said by who and those kind of things. Yeah. But we have a policy here, and it sounds like it's the same at the Women's Center of, you know, we're not going to make our own judgments and assessments. Right. Like I see this a lot of times when we've requested police records, where there's judgments, and it's so harmful and unhelpful. Like you said, notes are powerful, and they can be powerful to assist your client, or they can be just not good. And you know, you don't want to be putting your own judgments on there. First of all, you're not qualified to say, oh, this client is, I don't know what you might say. You might say, oh, they're an alcoholic or something. Well, yeah. So those kind of things are unhelpful. And then because it may be that information is either going to be shared with your client, like, are you okay with whatever you're writing? Is your client going to be okay with it? And there is also always a small risk that your information might have to be shared with someone, you know, outside. Of course, I think we always want to be vigorously defending litigation privilege for advocates, because we are doing work that is very akin to what lawyers do. And we can't do our jobs properly without being able to assure our clients that when we take notes about them, they're private and they're confidential. So, and there is some case law on our side, so. Okay, number 9 on Liza's list. Listen to what someone wants. Oh, wait, no. It's me. Okay, sorry.
Number 9 on Amber's list. Be kind to yourself. This is like a very good one. This is a nice one. And keep in perspective that you are doing the best that you can with limited resources in an often unfair and unjust world. And I couldn't agree more with Amber that this is really a job that you've decided to take on because you're probably an empathic person, because you're a compassionate person. And hopefully you have an analysis around why it is that you're going to do this work. So be good to yourself, because you're being very brave. This is difficult work that a lot of people don't want to do. The fact that you're going to sit and listen alone, be kind to yourself. Be gentle to yourself, for sure.
Yeah, I will say, having been both an advocate and a lawyer, I feel like advocacy is harder. It's harder work with less with less privilege. I mean, having the title of lawyer comes with a lot of privilege, including just automatic solicitor-client privilege, and people take your word for it if you say, "Oh yeah, I'm acting for this person and I have their consent," and all that kind of stuff. It's a hard job. Often we get the most complicated stuff. Yeah. Sometimes a lawyer in a summary advice clinic has referred someone to us, and we're gonna solve all kinds of, we're meant to solve all kinds of very complex problems for someone within the space of an hour, or a drop-in clinic, or off the side of our desk. And on top of that, you're often the place where you're the only place where that person has the ability to vent their frustrations. And sometimes it's directed at you, or it can feel like it's directed at you. So yeah, that can be tough. That can be tough. And yeah, I hope that you can always keep in perspective that you're not responsible for the weight of social inequities and injustice. You are an important part of you know, supporting people through that and bearing witness for them, and helping people get what they need, and sometimes challenging that status quo. But you don't carry that weight on your shoulders. You shouldn't carry that weight. So yeah, be compassionate with yourself. Apply the same compassion that you would for the folks you're working with to yourself, because you are also a human being and you deserve to be treated humanely. And I also find Vicki Reynolds quite helpful if you feel like you could use sort of some materials about that sheet. So Vicki Reynolds, V-I-K-K-I-E, and Reynolds, R-E-Y-N-O-L-D. She has a website. She does a lot of training, and she has a lot of materials up on her website for free. And I find her perspective of what social justice work is quite grounding and quite helpful. So maybe it's helpful to you as well. Okay, now we're moving on to Liza's number 9. Listen to what someone wants.
Yes. It can be a tough one. And again, when you're asking them, what do you want to get out of this? Be sincere that you really want to know. And sometimes if it's a child protection file, that's going to be a whole lot different than it is if someone's coming to see you because they want to apply for disability. So a completely different needs. But often what I say is, you know, often I have people come to see me that tell me that I've applied for disability 3 times, I've been denied 3 times, and I really want to get disability. And then you say to them, well, okay, let's give it another try. And the thing that I often say, which is something I like to say, is we might not be able to get through the front door sometimes, just no access, but there might be a little tiny window in the back that we can crawl through. And I find that is encouraging to people who have been denied 3 times, and they really want to pursue it. So listening to what it is that they want is part of that. And also sometimes, like I said before earlier, what you think it is that they need isn't what they want. So that's too bad. You're the advocate here. They're telling you what they need, and you just go with them because you have to, right? You can offer them options or different ways to look at things, like this is a possibility, this is a possibility, this is a possibility, but it's their choice. So listen to what it is that they want.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Liza. And that reminded me, because I think this is very related to or overlaps with when we were talking earlier about knowing your client's goal. But I think when you were talking about this piece, it also reminded me that there can be different ways to achieve a goal.
Right.
So yeah, knowing what someone wants, you know, you might have in your mind, okay, well, if this is the goal, this is how we can get there.
Right.
And sometimes it's you know, even if someone had, like you said, has tried to do something 3 times and they've failed, that might be an opportunity to really think through if that's something they're really trying to do, and you're really trying to meet someone's needs and help them with their goal, like thinking creatively that there might be another way to pursue it. Like it might be, like you said, that settlement route, or there might be a backdoor way. And so, yeah, sometimes our clients inspire us to try harder or be creative. Yeah, or do something differently. Exactly.
And the number 10 from Amber's list. Remind yourself of why you do this work. Aw, and I'm sure it's not for the money and glory, because you helped a person get a scooter to have mobility, because someone trusts you enough to tell you their story, because you helped someone stay housed. That's really beautiful.
Well, it's true.
I know.
I mean, that's what the work is. Like, what extraordinary work. I mean, sometimes it's easy to get a bit down by the weight of the injustice, but when you do, like, you know, you might not think it's a big deal to get someone an assistance, or, you know, to help someone stay housed. I mean, that's actually pretty huge. And sometimes it's the women that come in that remind me, and it can be like someone I met 10 years ago who I didn't even really know that I'd played that important of a role in their life. And it's cool that a lot of times it happens when you're feeling a bit the weight of it, that a woman will pop up or a client will pop up and go, you helped me like 5 years ago. You did, that changed my life. So super important work. And I kind of straddle the advocacy world and like the general legal profession, and the work that advocates are doing are so important. So hold that in, you know, hold on to that, because on a tough day like that helps you remind you of like, this is what we're doing and it's important work, and I need to keep sight of that, and that helps you continue that work in a good way. Yeah. All right. We're getting sunny in here.
I know.
Sorry if you're getting blinded by. Oh, okay. Lisa's number 10. She also says, be kind to yourself. So this is, again, yeah, it's interesting to see the overlap. If you lose a case, especially, be kind to yourself. You tried, and it is true advocacy that you learn from your mistakes. I have made many mistakes, and yeah, the piece is learning from them.
Right.
And I think you're right that to be kind to yourself, especially when you lose a case. And I'll tell you right now that I have lost some cases recently. Like, you know, you win some, and then there's some that are really tough. I had an eviction that I couldn't prevent recently, and that was a tough one.
I just wanted to say, to add a case, if I could, an example of a great loss. But in retrospect, something came out of it for myself. So I did lose a tribunal during a case for a woman who was given a lifetime ban to receive income assistance benefits before the change. So there's been a change in the last couple of years, but prior to that change, I agreed to try again for her, because she was living, there had been changes. Her health had changed. She was older, and now she had some very serious health issues, and she was never going to receive income assistance again. So I got it all happening, and we went to a tribunal, and it was the weirdest thing, but I had not spoken to her doctor directly, but I, of course, had done a lot of research on her health, and of course, same that I would apply to other files that I have researched based on her particular health situation. And I mentioned to the tribunal, one of the tribunal members, that a doctor had said this mind-changing thing for me, and the doctor said to me, in my opinion, diabetes is just another word for heart disease. Now, that doesn't sound like a stretch right now, but at the time that I said it, it wasn't something that we were talking about a lot. So I'll say 10 years ago. Now that's all you hear about. You hear the side effect of diabetes, besides stroke, is heart attack and heart disease. And as I've gotten older doing this work and learning more and more about the individual health, because that's something you do learn a lot of if you're an advocate. You learn a lot about health. And this is a very significant correlation and relationship between diabetes and heart disease. So every once in a while when I'm, watching television and I see an ad about lowering your ACL1 and lowering your chances for heart disease and heart attack and all these things, I realized that I made a really large statement that day. My client was denied income assistance at that time, but I often wondered, what does he think of himself? Because as he's leaving the tribunal, he bends down to me and he said, "And I don't believe the remark that you made about heart disease and diabetes." And I looked at him and I went, "Oh, that's terrible that he doesn't believe me." I felt terrible about that. But anyway, my client, the woman stayed in the community. I knew who she was. I had her information. As soon as the legislation was changed, I grabbed her and brought her back into my office, and she's back on disability again. So there we go. There was a good outcome with that. Don't forget who the people are that you serve. Don't forget about them. They need you, and they'll make you feel really good. Right? It makes you feel really good.
I think we've got through
We did it.
our top 10s,
We did.
which there was some overlap. Yeah, and like Lois said, there's about a half hour for questions or comments. If anyone has anything they want to share or ask.